The sky over Vigilum-Kyr tears open like silk set alight. It begins as a white seam drawn east to west across ash-brown cloud, above a hive whose mornings are rationed out by smog domes and luminal grids, vox masts avalanche static. Hab block loudspeakers cough, then die. For one breath, the city's gears still. Pilgrims freeze mid-step on cliffside stairs. Freight chains sway over abyssal streets. Heat pours through the seam. Dry, clean heat that smells like sun on old stone. A shape drops out of the white wound and hits a manufactorum roof with a bell note clang. Shock ripples. Raptor claws of lightning climb the spires. Pressure swings. Doors blow inward. Dust plumes down stairwells. On the roof stands a man broader than any statue. Mail and plates engraved with knot runes that catch the furnace glare. A red cape snaps like a pennant in updraft. In his hand is a hammer, short-hafted, silver-headed, carved all over with old words that look like thunder listening to itself. His eyes find the city's hurt, as if he can smell it. The promethium line that snakes the mid-levels has ruptured. A terminal block burns with a hiss that turns to a shriek. The smog dome buckles. The atmosphere inside will flash if the flame licks the dome's undercarriage. On the far horizon, a space elevator's counterweight shudders, and the cable trembles like a plucked string. A pilgrim bridge groans. 30,000 souls packed shoulder to shoulder in their hour of penitence, and the bolts give up with a noise like teeth cracking. The man, Thor, breathes once. He moves. He leaps. The hammer hums, and the air holds him in the way water holds a god of the sea. He strikes the promethium gash with the flat of the weapon. The impact flattens flame without blowing it. The shockwave knits the pipe's torn edge. He turns the heat into a folded seam of metal with a second blow. The hammer's runes glow, then fade. He turns. He drifts as if the city itself leans to him. The bridge's pins shear. He throws his hammer, and Mjölnir becomes a white streak that punches through the bridge's mid-span and returns, trailing steel cables like comet tails. Thor catches the hammer and drags, shoulder and back braided tight, the cables hissing over his bracers. He anchors them around a statue plinth of a faceless saint, whose stone is smoked black by 1,000 years of incense. The bridge sags but holds. People cry prayers and trample none. He lifts. He tilts. He touches his hammer to the underside of the smog dome. Lightning blooms, a lattice that spreads like frost. The smog thins where the charge breaks apart sulfur chains. The dome's pressure equalizes instead of exploding. 1,000 sealed lungs do not rupture. 1,000 glass eyes do not shatter outward. By the time the brood sirens catch up, millions live who would not have. Gunships scream overhead. Slate gray with hazard stripes and saint skulls. Vox traffic finds a new channel. A clean one that feels as if it belongs to no one and everyone. Unknown entity on the dome, a ground controller says from the command spire. Cancel that. Entity stabilizing lattice reactions. Saints. Do you see this? In a chapel angled like a tooth out of the spire's side, a woman in a long black coat watches in silence. Her hair is iron, cut with no vanity. Her left eye is that color of old gold that almost looks dead. Augmetics read the world in brittle detail. A rosette hangs against her breastbone. The rosette marks her as what she is. Inquisitor. Divert fire away from him, she tells the controller without inflection. If he is a demon, we shall learn it very quickly. A hollow table in the adjacent chamber throws up a city that breathes smoke. Around it, officers in glittering gorgets and hard eyes pivot, make rooms of their bodies for the woman who enters. Governor Lyra Voss, white-gloved, elegant in a way that hides muscle built by climbing the same stairs as her people. Whoever he is, Voss says, he just saved my city. Turn the guns to the real threat. That remains undefined, the Inquisitor says. For the moment, Thor looks up at the white seam still healing across the sky. He closes his eyes as if listening for a word said far away. When he speaks, the voice rolls through the Vox, as if the city had always been his. "I am Thor Odinson, son of Asgard," he says. "I will not see a world burn when I can hold it." The smog dome's lattice dims. The city breathes. Thunder stalks along the hive's bones and settles. The seam buckles again. The light is wrong this time. Not clean. It puckers and unfolds into 9 jagged mouths around the planet's exosphere. 30 seconds later, Auspec's screams translate into words anyone can understand. Translation event. Multiple signatures. Hostile. Across Vigilum-Kyr, the first impact sirens begin to climb. They hit first like green hail. Blunt-nosed meteors that punch through atmosphere trailing oily smoke. They are orc roks, looted engines wrapped in scrap metal and spite. Fired at a velocity calculated by a creature that counts by hitting. They plow into outhabs and manufactories on the hive's equatorial girdle. Fire, screams, crude banners slap the air, red handprints, crude glyphs that promise a good fight. Thor is already moving. He avoids the spire's landing pads and the kill arcs of layered autoguns. He drops through crosswinds that smell like iron and meat, and turns so the hammer's head points to the ground. He hits a rock hull with a note too pure for a war zone. Steel flowers open, orcs spill, screaming and laughing. Their laughter stops. He does not kill with thunder for spectacle. He kills to make space. He snaps a wrist and Mjölnir cracks a looted tank's axle. He slams the tank into the ground to make curved cover for a line of workers in blue oiled overalls crawling for a stairwell. He draws a circle of bright along the floor. Lightning fuses a ring of ferrocrete, halting a fire tide that would have raced those same people up the wall. He calls the wind not as a single blow, but in slicing gusts that lift smoke off the ground so spotters can see. He hurls the hammer through an orc's chest, and it returns through 2 more, following the line of his gaze with a predator's certainty. Where he stands, a space of air is held clean on all sides by things that die when they cross into it. The planetary defense forces, seeing a bubble of order, move toward it. Sergeants point. Boots thunder. Slug throwers chatter. He gestures with the hammer like a conductor. He pulls a crosswind down between 2 hab towers and turns it into a jet that flips a piece of orc artillery onto its back, like a beetle. He is careful. He breaks joints and axles, not people. He turns, and he is suddenly there, lifting the nose of a slaved cargo hauler before it kills an entire file of troopers who would have held their ground out of pride. His head bows once, as if to thank them for not dying. Governor Voss watches the data smears on the holo resolve into victories that look like a straight line. "Vox to all PDF units," she says. "Work with the entity. Let him anchor a corridor. Push your people into the corridor and hold. Armored second, infantry first. We are not losing civilians to green filth." "Ma'am," the ground controller says, "we have a clear path to lift 6. "Take it." She touches a study of the hive with one finger. "The Pilgrim Bridge?" "Held," a major says, disbelief leaking. "Sir, ma'am, that man secured it." The Inquisitor, Severine Kest, does not watch the holo. She listens to what the Vox does not say. There is no madness in the voices, no hysterical righteousness. There is only controlled fear and the hardness that comes when a city is given a spine to hold on to. Her augmetic eye ticks through thread overlays. The seam in the sky gapes still, wrong now in its color and pitch. There is intelligence in that wrongness. The orcs are a first mouthful, nothing more. "Divert assets to high orbit," she says. "Something worse comes." "What worse?" the admiral in orbit asks, voice flattened by void noise. "The kind that thinks," Kest says. She watches the man in the cape throw his hammer again and call it back, as if gravity is a superstition used for storytelling. He glances upward once, and she cannot read the look. It is not fear. It is not pride. It is a patience that offends her by being real. She keeps her silence. The first tide breaks. The second begins before the first is finished. The mouths in the sky spit cold light like chains uncoiling. Ships translate in with a sound like prayer said backward. They are knife-sleek when they first arrive, but their skins crawl into scales and eyes, as if they are unsure what shape to be. Their colors are cobalt and ash, and wrong. They bear 8-pointed wheels where Imperial ships would show the double-headed eagle. Blue fire bleeds off their void shields like thought undone. These are traitor Astartes, the Admiral says. Thousand Sun Splinter. The Azure Labyrinth. Sorcerers. A sorcerer's whisper can tell you who you are. It can make you tell it to everyone else. Governor Voss's knuckles whiten on the table's edge. Thor lifts his head. He looks at the new ships, and his face does what a cliff does when a wave hits it. He remembers a different sky. He remembers fighting a trickster, and loving him, and losing him, and how storms fall silent when the story twists. He breathes once to let the ache go through him as it must. On the hive's skin, the orc fight curdles into a rout. The rout becomes slaughter. Thor moves to end the killing quickly. He makes an alley into a chute and sucks the orcs down it with wind. They do not have to die facing the faces of the people they meant to murder. He breaks the last clanking machine and hears, under the gunfire and orders and human breath, a new sound. Chanting. He turns to the spire. The chanting hammers like a fist on the other side of a door. The War Council assembles in the command spire's long chamber with its ceiling of star paint now half peeled. Power cables focus into an altar box that hums faintly with the labor of microcogitators. Men and women in iron and silk stand in a snow of ash that blows down the long window cracks. Thor enters through a side hatch because doors are slow. He stoops slightly under the ceiling's edge. His cape drips a little acid rain onto the tile and hisses. The runes on his armor have lost some light. One band at his forearm is blackened, as if the hammer's head has been turned against it once. Governor Voss faces him. She does not kneel. She is a governor of a hive. She does incline her head as if before a storm that has decided not to ruin the harvest. You saved this city, she says. You are welcome on my world. Thor bows his head once, like a soldier to a commander he respects. You have brave people, he says. Brave and steady. That is half a victory before the fight begins. Flattery, the Inquisitor says, is not necessary. Identification is. Thor studies her. There is iron in the way she stands, iron and truth. He appreciates truth. Thor Odinson, I am not of your Imperium, but I am not your enemy. You are not of mankind, Kest says, and yet you walk in a man's shape, speak our tongue, and command storms that answer you like hunting dogs. I have seen saints do less. Saints? Thor says, amused without mockery. No, I am a protector. That is my word. It is why I live. The storms answer, because they have learned that I do not waste them. Yet, Kest says. The Azure Labyrinth approaches. They are not orcs. They make worlds say words they did not intend to say. She turns slightly. Admiral? On a hollow, a man in void black shows his profile. They carry black arc classes with reinforced rubric complements. Sorcerers. Their guns are less than a legion's, but their sorceries make up the difference. They have killed cruisers with a sentence. Then we do not give them one, Thor says. We give them lightning. Lightning does not touch what is not in the world, Kest says. These men unmake the world under your feet and ask you to step into the place where it was. They corrupt meaning. They will try to corrupt you. Thor considers the word. Corrupt. He has seen a scepter whisper to a brother and make him smile with a mouth that was not his. He has seen pride make mercy sound like weakness. He has seen it in himself. He nods. Then let us be careful, he says. We will fight, and we will watch our souls while we do. It is not so simple, Kest says. We do not keep our souls by watching them. We keep them by binding them, by law, by doctrine, by obedience. Governor Voss glances between them. Inquisitor, she says, voice held in a fist. My city is still choking. I need more than doctrine. I need something that kills ships. The Admiral clears his throat. We have 3 bastion platforms in high orbit and 2 cruisers in low. Our lances can cut a black arc if it stands still. It will not. The entity, Thor, could act as a lightning rod for their warp discharges. Draw them into a kill box. You would use me, Thor says, but there is no heat. I would ask you to serve beside us, Voss says. We defend, you strike, our guns finish. She looks toward Kest. Inquisitor, I will not exterminate as my hive, because you are afraid of prayers, said in the wrong voice. Kest's iron eye ticks once. I did not order. Exterminatus. You thought it, Voss says. I can smell it. Kest's jaw tightens. I thought of every tool a sane woman considers when an enemy like this arrives. Mercy is a virtue we practice where the enemy cannot see us. Thor studies her. Mercy practiced only where the enemy cannot see you, he says, is not mercy. It is housekeeping. You speak as if we have choices we do not, Kest says. We have fewer than I would wish, Thor says, and his patience turns to stone under his voice. But we have some. We will keep them, or we will become the enemy we fear. Alarms scrape the room's edges. Panic tries to enter and fails. Translation complete, the Admiral says. Primary hostile is marked Arch-Wyrd Malachai. His flagship's warp signature is changing. It aligns with ritual nodes on the hive's skin. He's doing something to the city. Kest's head turns toward the chapel. The Pilgrim Bridge, she says. The chants. They are his anchor. He is making the city speak backwards. Then we cut his tongue, Thor says, and the hammer hums. The tactical briefing is done at a run. Malachai's goal is not to take ground or burn out a manufactorum. He threads rituals through habit, through the millions of small repetitions that bind a city. The chime for shift change, the prayer before the line starts, the lamp that flickers thrice before the dome recalibrates, the footfall on the 7th stair of a stairwell worn by 4,000 years of tired boots. He laces sorcery through the daily to turn a normal day into an altar. He wants Vigilum-Kyr to speak his name every time it breathes, an obscene catechism that will widen the holes in the sky until the hive is a mouth and the planet is a throat. He needs 3 nodes to finish the knot. 2 are already in him, captured by his cult, subverted with a quiet that makes the hair on the back of the necks won't go cold. The 3rd is the Pilgrim Bridge, the bridge where Thor laid his cables. Can he hurt me? Thor asks Kest, blunt. Yes, she says, equally blunt. You are a man who carries God in his shadow. Malachai breaks oaths and refashions them. He will try to write the word that defines your worthiness and convince it to mean something else. That is clever. Thor's jaw is a rock. And wrong. Wrong does not spare you pain, Kest says. Nothing worth doing does, Thor says. He goes. He ascends like a thrown spear and then drops like one. The Pilgrim Bridge ahead is beautiful in a way this city rarely is. Banners, bright for once with a holier brightness than hazard red. Carvings unmarred by weapons stumblings. Saints whose faces have not been scoured down to abstract hope. At the bridge's heart, a circle of robed figures stand in linked hands. Their voices pour out like oil, smooth, slick, suffocating. The air above them curves inward like a bowl. The world wants to pour into that bowl and vanish. Thor lands. The impact breaks the circle, but the song does not stop. It continues in the stones, in the breath of 10,000 waiting pilgrims. It finds a new shape like water filling whatever it touches. Malachai is simply there, a void between thoughts in the crowd that everyone walks around without noticing. His armor is blue, his helm a jackal snout sunk in gold. His hands are empty. Words are his weapons. He tilts his head. His mouth does not move. He speaks anyway. Storm from another sky, he says inside Thor's skull. How do you define yourself? I do not define, Thor says. I protect. A verb, Malachai says. Too weak, too ambient. You need a noun. You need a title. Protector today, tyrant tomorrow. What is the difference? Except that tomorrow you will convince yourself you had no choice. He raises a hand, and it is empty. And then it is full. It holds a spear with a head like an absence. The spear is carved from a black that eats color, edged in mirror glass. Thor's skin tightens. The hammer's runes dim. Blackstone? Kest whispers through the vox, her voice tinny with range. Null material. It starves the warp. It will drink your storm dry. Thor throws without thinking. Mjölnir goes for Malachai's helm. The sorcerer moves reality to the side and watches the hammer streak past with courteous interest. He raises the spear and steps forward. The spear bites. Thor meets it with the hammer's handle, because it is what he has in his hand. The spear slides along it, drinks its light, and kisses Thor's ribs. There is a sound like a harp string breaking. Pain, bright and clean and personal, cuts through armor and flesh and pride. Blood wets Thor's side. He leans into the pain as if into a wind off a fjord. He breathes it into his chest and makes room for it. He strikes. The hammerhead finds Malachai's shoulder. The sorcerer slides with it, letting physics take him a pace aside rather than resisting and losing an arm. Even demons prefer leverage. He retreats one step, and then is in 3 places at once. Behind Thor, above him, to his right. Thor turns. He is not a gymnast. He is a storm. He brings a bank of air down like a fist. The world kinks. Malachai stumbles. Fine dust lifts in a ring. Thor steps through his own dust and hammers the spear, not the man. The spear, shocked by what it drinks, sings. Its blackness gulps the light greedily, then chokes on it. A hairline crack hedges down the blade. Malachai laughs with admiration that might be real. "Better," he says. "But you bleed." "So do you," Thor says. And he is right. A trickle of warp-cold ichor smokes on the jackal breastplate from the place where Hammer found gold. They circle, because men with weapons do it even when the sky is a mouth above them. Around them, the chanting changes. It is not words now. It is the sound of thought thinking itself into a corner and realizing it likes the corners better than the rooms because the corners are tight and defined. "Give me your oath," Malachai says, almost gentle. "Just a grain. Promise that order is worth any cost. I will make your hammer always return. You will never be unworthy again. You will never have to choose between a few and a many, and admit later, alone, that you chose wrong." The hammer's handle twitches in Thor's grip. He hears a voice he knows, a whisper of a father whose pride and love were a yoke. He sees a brother laughing as he lies. He sees Asgard reflected in a broken window on a distant world, and feels a grief no battle will ever wash out. He looks past Malachai. He looks at a woman with a shaven head, holding 2 children by their sleeves, both trying not to cough from the not smoke that wants to be in them. She is not watching the duel. She is watching her own breath to make it not do anything wrong that might make a sorcerer notice her. Thor's jaw locks. "No," he says. "If I never choose wrong, I am not choosing." Malachai's head tilts. "Pride dressed as humility," he says. "We have a robe like that in the wardrobe too." He moves. The spear flickers down, not at Thor, but at the stone. The crack radiates through the bridge into the circle Thor drew earlier with his lightning. The ring softens. Its edge wavers. The world wants to pour. Thor moves to block it with his body, as if he can stand in for the stone. He can, for a breath. He feels a pull that wants to pull more than flesh. Mjölnir's runes stutter. He is not unworthy. He is not. But worthiness is not a status. It is an act lived again and again. Doubt is part of that act. The hammer feels the doubt and waits. And because it waits, it is not there when he reaches for it with the lazy thought that it will be there. His fingers close on air. He looks down, and in that heartbeat Malachai smiles with true joy. He lunges. Something cold like an empty church rushes up the bridge. Women in black plate harness, with wings of vanishing at their temples, move without banners. Sisters whose throats sing no words, because their gift is the absence of the warp, and the warp is sound. Advance like a famine through a feast hall. At their black boots, servitors bear reliquaries. Black crosses made of the same light-eating matter as Malachai's spear, but carved into shapes a human hand can hold without going numb forever. Mechanicus acolytes chant in a language that sounds like machinery, remembering it is holy. The sisters' quiet hits the ritual like an amputation. The world stops chewing itself. The pilgrims breathe in and do not choke. Thor flexes his right hand and finds the hammer there, because worthiness was never a mood. It was the choice he made. While bleeding, he hits the spear again. It shatters along the hairline it grew earlier. A sliver flares and vanishes somewhere that is less and more than air. Malachai, suddenly weaponless, stands with a courtier's grace and bows. A lesson then, he says. You learned it in time. Good. Lessons paid with blood are harder to forget. He is gone. Not running. Not stepping through a door. Just absent from this sentence. Thor sinks to one knee because he is not ashamed to do so. He breathes. The world starts again. The sisters pass by him without kneeling. One, tall, scarred, eyes like winter in a place with no winter. Pauses. She does not speak. She cannot. Her presence says as loudly as words, "Stand up." He rises. Above them, the sorcerer fleet turns, bleeding blue fire out of its engines. The bastion platforms open like flowers. Lance light falls in clean spears. Two traitor ships die with a noise like a page closing across a verse that runs backward. Two jump, tearing runnels in the void like claws dragged over ice. One remains, as if out of politeness. "Inquisitor," the admiral says, breathless. "We secured 2 kills. Our shields held. The entity, the ally, drew a charge that would have cut us." "Good," Kest says, as if acknowledging a sword stroke in a duel. "Quarantine the bridge, burn the cult from the foundations, lock the pilgrim stairs, and prepare him for transit." "Him?" Governor Voss asks, head snapping. "Where?" Kest does not look at Thor. "Terra," she says, "the throne. He bleeds. We cannot afford to guess what he is." Thor sets the hammer on his shoulder. "I do not refuse counsel," he says. "If your king wants words, he will have them." "He is not a king," Kest says. And in the flatness there is prayer. "He is the only thing that stands between us and the thing that shouted at your sky today. You will show respect." "I respect strength that holds," Thor says. "Lead on." The void ship that carries him bears an old name, Pax Helios. Its hull plates are inscribed with prayers like circuits. Its spine is a cathedral with a keel. Custodians with Oramite armor stand like chapter headings in the book of its corridors. Sisters of silence move like commas that bite. Medicae work over Thor's side in a chapel that smells of antiseptic and sealant and stale incense. His blood on their gloved hands could be anyone's, but is thicker, brighter, of a color that would look garish on any common cloth. A man joins him in the medici hours. The man wears black with a small, unfancy aquila at the throat and no weapons. His eyes are the color of a bruise. "I am Confessor Verin," he says, polite. "I speak for the God Emperor where no one else should. I do not judge. I help men judge themselves." "Then we will have no quarrel," Thor says. "I do not fear my own judgment." "Few do," Verin says. "If they did, my work would be a festival instead of a war that never ends." He sits. He does not proselytize. He asks what Thor believes. Thor tells him. "I hold one oath," Thor says. "Protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is the shape of my life. Strength is entrusted, not owned. And if to protect one group, you must kill 1,000,000? Verin asks the question with the gentleness of a man who has had to ask it before and hates that he still must. Thor looks at the ship's ribs. "Then we count. We count with grief. We do not turn counting into a doctrine we enjoy." Verin's mouth is a tired line. "We enjoy nothing," he says, "but we endure Our laws are the instruments by which endurance is made into policy instead of accident. Policy becomes habit, Thor says, eyes lowering. Habit becomes a way to hide from choices. Sometimes, Varen says, sometimes habit saves us from fatigue. The galaxy is very large, my lord. I am no lord. You are something, Varen says. Names will stick to you whether you want them. That too is a habit. Thor nods, not liking it, and not denying it. Mid-transit, the ship shivers the way a man shivers before illness. Gellar-field strength jumps, then dips. The light in the chapel goes flat. The alarm sends no sound. It sends a pressure on bones that says, move or drown. Thor stands before he thinks to. Custodians have their guardian spears in their hands without having lifted them. Sisters form knots at corridor junctions. The air goes sweet and rotten together. The thing that enters is an answer to a question Malachai asked and did not finish. It is a man-shaped storm, wearing a grin built of borrowed glory and bone. It has Thor's shoulders and his half-smile when he means to be kind, and fails. Only here the kindness is gone. The hammer it carries is chain-bound iron with teeth. It drips something that sizzles when it hits the deck. Its eyes are Thor's eyes. If Thor had let pride be a religion. Brother, it says, and the word tastes good in its mouth. Do not be small. I am not small, Thor says. You will be if you kneel to a corpse, the mirror says, and its laughter bounces off the chapel ribs and comes back thin. Rule, rule as you were born to. Let the Imperium be Asgard under your boot. Kind boot. Kind tyranny. The best kind. You do not even have to admit it as tyranny. We will call it shelter. Who are you? A custodian asks. He should not ask, but he asks because understanding helps you kill. I am the optimization of his flaw, the thing says. I am Thunraz, gilded gale, the god of storms you deserve if you choose the easy words. I am the war the warp wants, with his face on it. It walks with the stride of someone who expects the room to make space. It lifts its hammer, and gravity seems to lean toward it. Thor steps into the leaning. No, he says, and his simple word is a wall. They clash. There is no room to swing in a chapel meant for words. They swing anyway. Mjölnir rings when chain iron hits it, and the ring hurts men with psyker senses and comforts those without. Sparks blow through the field lines like starlings. Sisters advance, and their nulls drag at Thunraz's skin. His grin turns tight. Silence, he snarls. And for a second, the ship's chapel is a cave, where a king heaps his father's bones and calls it humility. Thor takes the second and uses it. He does not hit Thunraz. He strikes the deck. Mjölnir's runes bite into the steel and pour a negative into the Gellar-field. The field bulges. It grabs a piece of warp like a fisherman's net, grabbing a slick thing that hates the net. The thing thrashes. The ship groans. If ships had bones, Pax Helios would be showing her ribs. Hold, a custodian says, voice as level as a carpenter's line. Hold, and the light will find you. The light does not come from any window. It is not light that travels. It is presence. It drops through the ship, through the Gellar-field, through the warp, as if there were no verb in the universe that could say no to it. It is a son nailed to a throne. It is a man burned until only law is left. It is the Emperor's gaze, cold as a North Sea, and kindly as a man cutting a child's hair so the child will not be shamed. Thunraz recoils as if slapped by the hand that measured stars. He does not scream. He is proud. He leaves with something like a bow made to an equal he will kill later. The air warms. The chapel smells like stale incense again. Thor breathes as if he has done something difficult that made him happy. Confessor Varen's hands shake. He hides them by folding them. He inclines his head to Thor, to the custodians, to the sisters. Continue, he says, to Terra. Terra rises like a wound that never healed because the body would die if it did. Saturnine forts blink cold fire across the ship's path in the language of authority. The phalanx floats with its engine quiet as ancient whales sleep. The planet's shields are not walls. They are continents of light. The cradle of humanity will break your ship and your life with impersonal care if you look wrong at its gates. They bring Thor down through bands of sky that taste of oil and prayer. The palace is not a building. It is a continent of intention studded with cathedrals, a mountain range of gold, a machine built to convince the sun to rise every day. At its heart, a room that is not a room holds a chair that is not a chair, with a man in it, who is not a man, except when he chooses. He does not choose often now. Machines sing for him. Priests bleed their throats dry, so he does not have to. Choirs of psychers burn out like moths, find their bodies beautiful. Custodians and sisters lead Thor through spires, so tall gravity itself goes thin. They remove his weapons because it is the habit here, and they give them back because they understand that in some cases, this is theater that should not be played. The audience is a silence. There are people in the room, but they do not matter. The light speaking to him matters. It is not words. It is an exchange of realities. He is storm. The thing on the throne is law. He is motion. The throne is definition. When they touch, it is startling in the way of plunging a burned hand into snow. He understands something that makes him look away out of respect, and then back out of stubbornness. This man built a wall between the galaxy and what wants it, and has been nailed into that wall for 10,000 years, and he is still, now, every second, choosing to be the wall. The wall looks at the storm and asks a question. It is simple and impossible at once. Will you be ours? Not ours as in chained. Ours as in accounted for. Ours as in placed on a chart. So when the voice says, fire, the gun knows which way to turn. Ours as in, you do not walk into a city and insist the city be your ethic. Ours as in this civilization is made out of triage and teeth and funerals. And your light is bright and will blind us if we do not shade it. Thor answers with his life because he cannot not. He shows the Emperor. He does not tell, he shows. What mercy means when you swing a hammer that can crack a god's knee. He shows the Valkyrie carrying a friend out of a fire that killed 1,000 strangers, and how he still believes it was right. He shows Asgard in shadow and light, and how glory can drown a city if you pour it too fast. The throne shows him a galaxy like an organ with too many cancers. It shows him a hive where a governor chose to spare a cult out of pity, and the planet died 1 year later, down to its iron. Shows him a forge where law flayed 1/9 of the workers to save the machines, and that 1/9 lived on in the machines forever because their children did not starve and become pirates who killed 1 billion later. Shows him arithmetic engraved on knife blades and kissed clean with tears. The room is still. The custodians do not shift their feet. Confessor Varen stands at the back and prays that the answer will not be pride in armor. There are 3 visions. The choice is simple because it is cruel. Return. The throne can punt him back through the seam he made because the Emperor's hands still close on cosmic threads when he wants them hard enough. He will go home. His memory of this universe will fade because a mind is meat, and meat does not keep all its rips. He will remember something important and not be able to name it. He will sleep badly for 1 year and never know why. Free agent. He stays. He refuses sanction. He roams like a storm, breaking sieges and making admirals kneel for help, and then get up with hatred in their eyes because they are men who answer to chains of command. And he is a storm that refuses to learn the chain's name. He saves millions. He makes enemies who will shoot at him before they shoot at the Tyrannid the next time the Tyrannid arrives. He becomes a civil war, written out in small explosions until the big one. Sanctioned servant. He kneels. He lets law collar him. He keeps the right to refuse orders with conditions, the right to call mercy, the right to be a voice in council that is not doctrine, and is not sneer. He loses the right to bust thresholds because he feels like it. He gains the right to rewrite some thresholds because he shows why they kill more than they save. He becomes part of the machine, and the machine becomes a little more like a man, breathing in hard weather. The throne does not tug. It does not bribe. It is a line on the ground and a question on a knife. Thor closes his eyes. He opens them. He flexes his right hand around a handle he does not hold in this room, because respect is the law here. He breathes. He counts, because counting is sometimes the only way a man cannot lie to himself. He kneels. It is not a base. It is alignment. "I will serve," he says. And the words feel like frost that does not bite but clarifies. "I will not practice mercy only in secret. If I am ordered to let a world die, I will ask how hard we tried to teach it to live first. If I am told to kill a child because of a doctrine, I will lay down my life before I obey. If I am commanded to hate, I will refuse. If I am asked to protect, I will come." The light warms. The throne does not smile. Somewhere deep, a Gainrider breath becomes easier. He rises. They bring him armor built by hands that remember when gold was a metaphor, before it was a metal. Auramite plates engraved with sigils that mean nothing to Asgard, and everything to Terra. The Aquila spreads its wings not over his heart, but under it, etched into the inner weave, a law under muscle. The rune of the hammer is worked into the chest, not dominating, companion to the eagle. Sisters carry a black cross of Blackstone. The Mechanicus binds slivers of it into the hammer's head, so that when he strikes a sorcerer, his strike bites ideas as well as bone. They call him Lex Tempestus in the ledgers because ledgers love titles. He shrugs at names. He becomes what he always was, with a uniform cut to this war. Confessor Varen meets him as he descends the stairs from that room where the word audience is inadequate. He bows, not as to a king, but to a tool just sharpened properly. "Mercy practiced in secret," he says, a small smile cracking the bruise of his eyes. "You will not do that." "I cannot," Thor says. "Good," Varen says, and softer. "Hard." The custodian assigned as liaison comes with a face like a cliff under snow and a name from a book. Aquilian. He says, "Boundaries acknowledged, commanders briefed. When we order and you refuse, we will hold you to your refusal. Be ready to explain it in blood. I would not honor you if I did otherwise," Thor says. They shake hands, like men who will fight back to back before the year is done, and dislike each other a little less with every corpse that would be both their faults if they had not been there. They send him back to Vigilum-Kyr, because stories that begin should not be left to end themselves. He returns, not like a comet, but like a doctrine that learned to breathe. The hive's people look up and do not kneel, because their governor told them not to. Governor Voss meets him where he first stood on the roof, whose shingles remember the first hammer note. She smiles with 3 hours of sleep in the last 48 ticking under her eyes. "You went to the throne and came back, instead of burning me for calling an Inquisitor proud," she says. "I do not burn friends," Thor says. "Good," she says, "because we have more war." They do. Malachai is not dead, only fascinated. He returns with a smaller ship and a finer blade, interested now the way scholars are interested when a page suddenly reads back to them. He brings a champion this time, a rubric golem whose body is a sarcophagus for a pariah's mind. The golem's blade is a halberd of woven null that eats light, while light strikes it. They fight in a cathedral. The hivers never expected to matter. It matters now. The fight is clever and clumsy and holy. Thor learns to let the Blackstone in his hammer drink first and strike second. He learns to ground his lightning through altar rails and swing at angle, because straight lines are sorcerer's favorite. Malachai learns that patience is not just a word Thor says. He leaves with one arm not working. The champion leaves in pieces too small for fusion to recover. The Inquisition watches and notes the way Thor stops to lift a fallen acolyte and be sure a child under a pew breathes. Kest's mouth goes tight. She sends for materials she can trust anyway. Trust is a habit she cannot cut out, even when perhaps she should. Other enemies watch, because enemies always do, when new banners rise. On the Black Legion's long deck, a warlord with 13 scars drawn on a blade laughs and says, "Let him serve a golden corpse for now. He will learn a corpse is a crown you can steal." In a craft world where songs are maps, a farseer lifts stones and places them in a river. "A new piece on the board," she says to a war leader with eyes like knives. "He is a storm that may drown us or save us, depending on which mountain he chooses to strike." In a dark city inside a knife sheath of real space, a Drukhari Archon licks a tooth and considers how lightning tastes on flayed tongue. In a tomb that remembers suns older than this galaxy's spiral arms, a Necron overlord watches lightning crawl over a void shield and calculates how a hammer interacts with dolmen gates. Curiosity is an old hunger in old metals. In the cold that is not cold between stars, a hive mind turns a million tiny faces toward a new flavor and files it as nuisance predator problem teacher. Within the skein of fate, a bird-headed liar who is also truth lets one feather drift and smiles with a beak that no one would be wise to trust. Thor stands on a spire with Mjölnir heavy with new work and looks at a city still alive. The aquila on his chest looks like a bird refitted to a storm, and the rune beside it is no longer arrogance, but recognition. He calls rain, not to wash blood away. Blood does not wash. It sinks and feeds old roots, but to fill cisterns on the high roofs, so that the people will not carry water up 1,000 stairs tomorrow. He calls wind down the furnace channels to cool metal, so men will not pass out and fall into gears. He calls lightning into the sky high above the dome, where it will put on a show for children that will tell them the sky does not always hate them. On Vox, Inquisitor Kest's voice comes, iron wearing the slightest, most expensive tiredness you can buy with honesty. Storm Warden, she says. She uses the ledger name because ledger spoken aloud is a way to make the ledger obey the world instead of the other way around. Report. City breathing. Thor says. Enemy bled. People saved. Doctrine preserved where it deserved to be. Doctrine broken where it wanted to be God. A pause. We will argue that last in council, Kest says. Bring your reasons and your blood. I always do, Thor says. He looks across the hive. On a wall facing a square where children run, now that the alarms are only bells again, someone has painted a new sign with dead woman's lipstick. It is an eagle with a hammer between its wings. Crude, off-center. Alive, not an icon. A promise painted shaking by a hand that had to paint it before the feeling left. He touches his chest, where that promise lies under his heart. Protect, he says softly into the wind. Again and again, lightning forks across the dome in two wings that spread and then lock into a shape. For a breath, the sky wears a double-headed bird with a hammer for a spine. Then it is only weather, and men and women go on making small, stubborn choices that matter, because someone will count them later with grief and hope. And a storm walks the parapets of a city that did not die, and refuses to be either a god or a boy who thinks he is one. In the mouth of the warp, Thunraz watches from a distance, mistaken for safety, and smiles a thin smile. Not yet, he says. But soon, on the golden throne, something tires that cannot be tired and endures anyway, watches a storm make room inside law, and does not smile, because smiling is a habit he cannot afford. But he feels, for a fraction of a second, in a mind where fractions are universes, the warmth of a hearth before a march. The galaxy notices a new symbol and learns the first of its meanings. The second and third will come with time, with blood, with boundaries kept and broken, with councils shouted in rooms where men bleed when they say no. For now, Vigilum-Kyr sleeps with one eye open and dreams of rain. The sirens quiet, but do not fully stop. They learn to breathe like sleepers. On Vigilum-Kyr, smoke threads the mid-levels. The Pilgrim Bridge wears a hairline scar as clean as a surgeon's stitch. Banners hang damp, rain heavy from the storm he called not as spectacle but as water. The ash on the stairs is gone where thunder rinsed it. It still fills the creases of stoned saints' eyes. Purge teams move with the cautious speed of men who know they could make everything worse with one wrong door kicked open. The Sisters of Silence pass through their ranks like winter. The Inquisitor moves slower than all of them and arrives first, because paths part. Governor Voss works where the blood is. She leans over a stretcher to sign a permit that lets a hab quarter keep its water during ration block. She hears a sob and does not turn. She has learned that turning breaks people's facades, and sometimes facades hold them up. She feels the storm above like a roof beam. Thor descends into the Manufactorum canyons, where men with stained hands and scraped harnesses make machines breathe, and, sometimes, weapons. He presses the hammerhead to ritual nodes hidden in joints of stone and steel. He does not smash, he rings. Each contact sends a small, precise shock along a line the sorcerer carved. The shock meets its twin from a sister's null and dies there with a sliver of blue smoke that is more idea than gas. "You're wasting time," a PDF captain says, not unkindly, watching him trace a sigil under a service stair while his squad sweeps a hallway above. "We could burn this whole wing to be sure." Thor considers the stair and the captain together, not condescension in his look, but attention. "If you burn the wrong thing," he says, "it teaches the right thing to hide deeper next time." He taps the hammer. The sigil fades. The stair remains. People will still climb it to shift. Better to make the wrong thing know it has no house. The captain grunts. "You talk," he says, "and you hit. I try not to do only one," Thor says. He walks on, in a narrow vent tunnel where children play when they should not. He finds a shrine built of cog scraps and bead wire. It is to a saint with no face like all the others, but the lips are painted red, with a stolen stick of a miner's wife's color. The rune of his hammer is scrawled next to the aquila by a hand that didn't get the line straight and didn't care. He touches the cold metal, not to consecrate it. He does not impose words on prayers he did not teach, but to feel the heat it held when someone put their hope down on it long enough for the pigment to set. In the command spire, Kest draws lines no one else can see onto a glass screen and reads them as orders. She signs a set of warrants. She cancels 3 others. She does not justify either aloud. Voss, seeing the numbers, lifts her chin. "They go to the gallows?" Voss asks. "Some," Kest says. "Some to work camps, some to penance squads, a handful to Medici cloisters, a few." And here she lets her iron eye rest on Voss, as if she expects the woman to hit her for what she will say. "To go free." "Free?" Voss says. Her mouth makes a white line. "They made my streets say backward prayers. They also turned themselves in," Kest says. "They brought names we could use and maps with tunnels we would not have found in time." She does not smile. "I do not warm to mercy. I keep it as a tool and hate it when I have to. Today we need it. Today," Voss says. She signs another permit to keep water in a thirsty quarter. "Don't ask for parades." "I never do," Kest says. Thor arrives as men pin seals to doors and chalk symbols that will be blessings when seen from a street corner, and execution notes when copied in a judge's hand. He listens as Kest lays out her net. Confessor Varin stands with his fingers folded and his eyes on the floor, the way men do who are not begging, but asking all the same. "I will ask," Thor says. "The penance squads, they fight at the front?" "They do," Kest says. "Does their sin make their flesh cheaper?" Thor asks. "Do you want an unbloodied child in their place?" Kest asks back. "Counting is ugly. We do it anyway." "We do," Thor says. But we do not make the ugliness a law we love. Give them armor that works, weapons that do not explode if the blessing is mumbled, a sister to watch their dreams, a confessor who will not make their death their absolution. Kest stares at him for a long second. "You think you are clever," she says, and there is a little relief in the bitterness. "You are simply stubborn." "I am stubborn," Thor says. "I will be until it is not needed." He turns to Voss. "The quarters with hunger?" "I know," Voss says. She does not bristle that he tells her what she already knows. "I'm opening the high cisterns and putting my own seal on the ration logs. Anyone who lies will talk to me, not a clerk." "Good," Thor says. He looks through the window at the city. "I will ring it once more." He climbs stairs built for kings and maintenance workers and sets the hammerhead against the dome's inner skin. He calls no lightning. He simply vibrates the lattice like a struck bell. Dust swirls. A million metal things find a new frequency and decide not to crack. The city exhales. The summons comes as words on a slate because the palace knows that a voice across a vox would ask for too much in the asking. Lex Tempestus. Report to Dalmus-Ferrum for consecration and issuance. It is a forge world with a gravity that makes men born elsewhere walk like they are carrying a friend on their shoulders. It hums in its stones. The atmosphere tastes of iron filings and prayer. Mars taught Dalmus-Ferrum to wash its machines. Dalmus-Ferrum taught its sons to sing to their tools at shift change and mean it. Magos Orion receives Thor with the courtesy of a craftsman who meets another craftsman. He wears more steel than man and more wires than veins. His voice box is tuned to a clean tenor. His optics click and iris. He does not bow. He inclines. "You are the sanctioned storm," Orion says. "We will bind your lightning to reason." "If you can," Thor says, not as challenge, but as invitation. They lay Mjölnir on a black anvil that drank 3 suns to be born. They cut slivers from a black stone cross with lasers that do not sing because the stone hates song. They inlay the slivers into runes like nerves under the hammer's skin. They carve sigils that are not Asgard's, and not Mars's, and not Terra's, but something that can speak to all 3 without lying. Sisters stand at the door and keep the air quiet. Confessor Varyn stands by the anvil and keeps the men quiet where air cannot. "This will take from you," Orion says as he slots a shard into a groove where the hammer seems to have been waiting for it all along. "Every time you bite a sorcerer's lie, your storm will run thin. Your hand will feel heavier. You will need rest a man in war never gets." "I lived without sleep when my people needed me," Thor says. "You are not in Asgard," Orion says. "Here, fatigue is not romance. Here, it kills a squad because a hammer fell an inch low." Thor nods. "Then I will rest when it saves a squad," he says. The Magos considers him with emitters, then whistles a brief note that might be respect. "We will add a charge lattice," Orion says. "Your strike will store a portion of the enemy's noise. You can discharge it later, like holding back thunder for the next field," Thor says. "Exactly," Orion says. He's pleased when men understand his toys. But do not hoard. Hoarding makes men think saving for tomorrow is more beautiful than saving a life today. "You'd make a passable confessor," Varyn says. "I would make no priest," Orion says. "I prefer screws to souls. They are more honest. Hold the wrench. It turns. Hold a man. He asks why. You should listen to him anyway," Varyn tells Thor, smiling a little. "Honest screws built this place. Then I will," Thor says. The consecration rite is half machine oil, half incense. The Mechanicus chant and clatter in Benharic. Custodians stand like bookends. The hammer gleams not brighter, but steadier. When Thor lifts it, he feels a new weight under the old weight, and, under that, a leash he tied himself, because men who become weapons must keep a hand on their own throats, or someone worse will. He says nothing. He turns the hammer in his hand until its balance is a circle again. The distress goes out not as a cry, but as a scratch in a routine report. Orcs do that. You hear them. Tyranids do that. You smell them. The Drukhari cut you and leave the wound to find you later. Sarrow's Weald is a green bruise on a brown sector map. An agri-moon with trellises and spirals and rivers in straight lines because the men who laid them down could not afford to be pretty. Thin clouds run in lanes. Farm spires are cross-hatched with walkways where boys and girls carry insect traps and sometimes look at the stars at night and tell each other lies they want to be true. The webway rent opens in a silo. Nothing leaves the rent except air first. The pressure makes the silo sigh. Then men with knives that look like smiles move through the sigh. They are fast and clean. They cut not to kill, but to bleed. They are hunters for whom pain is instrument and trophy and theater. They wear armor like insect carapace and bones like jewelry. They take prisoners the way chefs take ingredients. The moon sings softly with its millions. The Drukhari make it sing in a higher pitch. Thor falls through crisp air that smells of dirt and pollen and poison. He lands on a seeded field and crushes no seedlings. He burns a rectangle of pathogens where his boots touch and leaves it clean. Mjölnir hums. He calls wind and nothing else. Lightning would burn the crop. The wind becomes a curtain, a pressure that herds the raiders away from a cluster of workers in smocks and toward a ditch with a wall of blackstone ripped from a transport pallet and tilted just so by his hand. They hit the stone and feel sick. They fall. They do not die. His hammer goes to joints, not throats. A raider skiff screams past, sails snapping, lances cutting neat holes in the air that will become scars in the children's throats in a year if he lets them. He tilts the wind. The skiff tips, catches a hook, spins, lands in a hedgerow with a crunch that gratifies men who spend their lives nursing plants. Drukhari pour from a slick red portal like wine out of a bottle that resents wine. Thor sees the anchor, a spine of bone hammered into silo stone and inscribed with pain in a language that is more cough than word. He throws. Mjölnir hits the anchor not hard but right. The portal shrinks, not as if it is closing, but as if it remembers how to be a small thing. He moves. He works fast. He does not make the mistake he made on the bridge. He does not assume the hammer is there for him if he does not choose it. He chooses it with every breath. He breaks a Kibbolite's arm because the man's hand holds a chain that holds a child. He lifts the child and the chain together and lets the mother's hands do the rest. He bleeds twice. Drukhari blades kiss where his armor has not yet learned this moon's gravity and leaves a sting that tries to curl back into the cut and stay there as a second mouth. He touches the blackstone plate at his belt and breathes. The mouths become scars that will fade. Wind is not enough, he calls a little thunder. He aims high. He makes noise in the sky where predators listen. Lightning crawls across the thin upper clouds and sketches the Aquila with a line that breaks and reforms. The Drukhari flinch as if they remember myths from planets they reduced and stories they told victims to watch their faces break. The portal resists closing. It has a taste for this moon now. He thinks of resonance. He thinks of bells. He thinks of a silo ring when you hit it with a spanner to call a work party in. He hits the silo, not the portal. The sound goes down the bones of the structure and up into the anchor and out the other side of reality. The portal shudders like a wounded mouth and snaps shut so fast it cuts a raider half in. Silence comes back, like a wet animal crawling under a porch. He kneels in the dirt with 2 dead in his arms and 3 living pressed against his knees. He gives the dead to someone else, because he must. He stands. Kest arrives hours later with a gunship and judgment. She looks at the cut fields. She looks at the people counted. She looks at the raiders bound and sick and snarling. Her iron eye ticks. "We cannot strike Kamara. Not without spending divisions I do not have," she says. "We can make it harder to find mouths here." She looks at the Drukhari prisoners. "We can kill them." And no, they won't tell their masters where our doors are. They will tell anyway, Thor says, but tell it with screams they do not enjoy. There is no version of choosing here that does not keep a secret somewhere. He looks at the farmers. Strengthen the silos. Blackstone in the walls where you can. Wind vanes wired with sanctified copper. Altar bells tuned not for ears but for air. Teach every child to ring them. Teach them fear, an old woman says, voice like a frost-bitten reed. So they don't sleep. Teach them to wake fast, Thor says. Teach them to count their breath and choose the way the field tells you rain is coming. Fear is a tool. It is not a house. Kest doesn't argue. She directs 3 squads to 3 farms and 1 to a school. She orders a crone blade stolen in the fight placed in a black box and sent to Dalmus-Ferrum to live where it will not sing to anyone. She watches Thor wipe his blood off the hammerhead onto a rag and burn the rag. She nods, one soldier to another. You are learning our ugliness, she says. I am learning you carry it without loving it, he says. On our good days, she says, they leave the moon with more living than they expected to. Fewer than a world deserves. On a shrine world named Litan VI, Malachai builds a tower out of prayers said wrong. He inverts the order of candles on an altar, so the wax melts backward onto hands that bless. He tunes a choir an eighth of a tone off, and whispers that they sound truer to their god's hunger this way. He lays down checkerboard floors, so men will step only on light squares, and think they are choosing, while he dictates where the light lies. He builds a spire that hums like a note you cannot stop hearing, because it is inside your ear. It is not the tallest spire in a city of spires, but it is the only one that tastes of copper when you stand near it, and the only one that makes children cry when their fathers pick them up and look confused. Thor arrives with a lance commander, 3 sister squads, a hab's worth of faith, and the hammer that has learned where to bite. He does not knock the spire down. He climbs it. At the 80-year mark, where spectacle would take the breath of men who like to watch things fall, Malachai steps out of the air, hands politely empty. You carry Blackstone now, he says, with admiration that could be love, if love were not a word men like him have to earn and do not. Do you know what it does to you? It reminds me to count, Thor says. It drinks you, Malachai says. Every time you speak its language, you buy a sentence from a book that is not yours. I will pay, Thor says. And he will. The way farmers pay taxes they hate because roads must be mended or crops rot on the way to market. They fight like 2 ideas on a page written by a scribe who got wiser by the end of the page and want to go back and fix the first lines. Malachai delays. Thor refuses to be delayed. Malachai conjures visions that look like choices and are not. Thor sends them down bell towers like pigeons and listens for the wings. He bleeds where the blackstone slivers drag at his storm, and he cannot for a moment call anything but wind. And the wind is weak because the spire is a straw in the world's lungs. He picks the wrong moment to save a man. That is the truth. He chooses to pull a novice out of a line of fire rather than hit Malachai's steps in a sequence that would have pinned the sorcerer's foot for half of a breath. The novice will live. Malachai does. Thor lives too. The city lives. The spire breaks, not all at once, but in stages, like a man learning a new way to think. Malachai escapes, not haughty. He leaves a smear of blue where his shoulder drips. He looks back, just once, not with a curse, but with curiosity. One day, he says, someone will hang from a bridge while you have the spear in your hand that will kill me. I wonder which you will prefer to keep. I do not prefer, Thor says, breathing hard. I mourn both. And then I choose. Perhaps, Malachai says. We are both priests of the same altar then. He is gone. The sisters do not look at Thor with blame. They look at him with the gray assessment soldiers reserve for those who share their risks. Confessor Verin binds a wound and mutters a prayer that is more grateful than doctrinal. You paid, Verin says, indicating the tremble in Thor's right hand as he flexes it. You don't get to pay that coin indefinitely. Then I will borrow, Thor says, and repay with work. You are learning how we lie, Verin says, fond and fearful. We call exhaustion work and a deficit faith, and tell ourselves we can refinance both with courage. Sometimes we can, sometimes we must, Thor says. On the edge of a bone-colored nebula, in a place the void keeps for regret, Eldar ships drift like knives with souls. On a deck that is a garden and a war room, a farseer shapes sand into maps no man can read. She steps into Thor's path while he crosses a cathedral corridor on the Pax Helios, in the night watch, when even chronic insomniacs blink slow. Her armor is a brightness made out of music written in angles. Her helm is a slice of moon. Her voice is wind through chimes. Storm that swore to a corpse, she says, not unkindly, because when you speak truth, that hard, you give it like a mother gives castor oil, apologetic and insistent. Do you know the price of a path? I know the price of not having one, Thor says. You choose a corridor with walls, she says. Men who die in corridors convince themselves distance is victory. In my people, we live on narrow lines because the world tries to spill us. We enjoyed you once. We enjoyed you when your lines were wider. I cannot walk wide here, Thor says. If I do, I trample. She tips her head. Good, she says. Then listen. 3 turns from now in a place called Red Mesa, a voice you trust will order an atrocity dressed as arithmetic. Refuse it. A quiet canyon will collapse. A loud war will not begin. A child will live to fix a valve that would have killed 8,000 4 days later, and no one will thank you because they will not know. That is the only kind of gratitude worth having. What is your price for this? Thor asks. She smiles, like knives remember being silverware. Do not try to save a soul that is already mine, she says. Let one of my people go. Not now. When the time is right. You ask a favor on credit, Thor says. That is the only kind that pays, she says. She places a small stone in his hand. It is warm. It hums the tiniest voice, a single note that is a child inhaling once before a cry. A windstone, she says, the last breath of a dying world. Use it once. Save many, or save one you cannot carry, but know there is a price. The world that gave it to you will not be saved by you later. It will be saved by someone else, or not at all. I do not hoard miracles, Thor says. You should, she says, but she sounds like she admires him for saying it. Part of you already does. That is why you will be interesting to watch. That is why I risk this meeting. Leave your pride where you left your crown, Storm Man. Pride has eaten more worlds than chaos. She is gone, or his eyes learned that he was between sentences, where she always was, and he only briefly went. He pockets the stone. It is very small. Orders move like weather. They gather in quiet rooms out of 100 conversations and break over armies. The Council of the Pale Salon meets on a fortress world, where men measure their meals in grams and their lives in surrender pacts. Lord Militant Stregos, a man carved out of presence and cold meat, puts both hands on the table and expects the table to hold. Lex Tempestus, he says, making a name into an accusation just by letting it through his teeth. A law unto himself. An edict nailed to my regiments like an insult. I will not have it. Kest meets his eyes. You will not like him, she says. You will need him. He will refuse you in front of your men. He will explain why. They will still follow you. He makes you bleed fewer children and spend more ammunition. Accept the arithmetic. No, Stregos says. I will not have theater in my ranks. Reports say he refused an order to purge a hab with promethium because the cult inside was only 10%. If we had missed one, a world dies. If we had burned all, a world lives. If you had burned all, Verin says, calm, You would watch your men eat their hands in their sleep in 15 years, because they will count the faces in that hab every night they close their eyes. Those hands are the ones that pull triggers when you whisper soft now. He saved you a mutiny. Confessor, Stragos says. Not disrespect, not respect. The weight of a rank prefix replacing both. I kill that which threatens the Imperium. He kills, Kest says, and refuses to tell himself he never savors it. That is rare mercy. Aquilian the Custodian, who has not spoken, speaks. When he does, men remember to stand straighter, even when they are already straight. The Emperor sanctioned him, Aquilian says, not to increase your comfort, to increase survival. The Edict of the Tempest stands. Stragos stares at the gold face as if he can find a seam in it. He cannot. He relaxes his jaw, because he must. Because men like him know how to lose arguments and win wars. Boundaries, he says. Say them. Kest does. No exterminatus, while evacuation vectors exist, and time allows a single attempt by storm warden methods. Wind, lightning, shock. No blind culling where Blackstone can sift corruption. No doctrinal child killings. Custody, and cloister instead with null supervision. Refusals permitted in open council, not in the field without signal when communications allow. Refusal blood-priced, meaning explainable, actionable, accountable. Stragos makes a face like sour fruit and writes it down. I will write requests for exceptions, he says. Right, Aquilian says. We will read. The council moves on, because wars do not pause for men to prefer each other. Red Mesa is a mining world with cliffs like the ribs of a god that died and lay down. The wind there cuts words out of flesh if you say them too long. The people there work and do not sing. They drink a tea made from a plant that grows on cliff faces and tastes like iron filings and keeps men awake long enough to be tired when they fall on their pallets. Chaos comes to Red Mesa, not as sorcerers or raids, but as arithmetic. Missing rations, overfull trains, a rumor that a life can be made easy if you say a word a certain way before you sleep. Kest orders a purge, crisp and sane. The math says, burn the canyon where the rumor sleeps. The canyon holds 3,000 men, women, idle children. Thor remembers a knife voice in a garden, and a promise, refuse here. He refuses. Give me an hour, he says. I can draw their breath out of the canyon. You can't, the colonel says on the channel. The walls are too tight. Half will suffocate. They will if we light their roof, Thor says. The rest will burn. He touches the windstone in his pouch. It hums in his bones like a pill dissolving. He breaks the seal. Air pours out of the stone in a soundless rush that is not weather, but the memory of weather. It tastes sweet, like the first breath a man gets when he comes up from a dive thinking he will not. It finds lungs. It wakes men. It drags ash out of a child's nose and does not take the child's breath with it. It lifts spore dust, scatters it, kills it by making it feel ridiculous for thinking it is someone else's idea. The canyon empties. Not all at once, not neatly, but enough. Thor's hand shakes as if he held a rope for an hour. The wind dies in his palm. The stone is just a stone, dull and indifferent. Kest's voice comes on Vox. The canyon? Clear, Thor says. The cult's sleepers run. Sisters in PDF can catch. No fire. She does not argue. She sends men. She notes the casualties. She writes, acceptable, and hates herself a little for writing it. She writes, storm-used windstone, one less miracle. She hates no one for that. She does not thank the farseer she suspects. She refuses debts she cannot redeem. But that night, she closes her human eye, and for once, sleeps a little. In the morning, a valve on the western rail line sticks. The boy who fixes it is 9, and he learned to listen to the way metal complains from his mother. And he is alive. No one thanks anyone. The train arrives on time. The soldiers do not have to hunt wolves in the dark, because their rations did not arrive. A riot does not happen. Thor watches the men file past and does not ask for statues. Malachai learns. Pride is his flaw. It is also his engine. He builds the Azure Labyrinth in a place between human habit and warp grammar, a library made of echoes. He hires. No, that is the wrong word. He recruits with theology, an assassin who can write a name on a wall and make the wall say it out loud forever. He plans a new trap, not to meet Thor's hammer with a spear, but to arrange a moment where the hammer is the wrong kind of help. He chooses a fleet action. The Pale Salon assigns Thor to a convoy escort, threading a corridor of bad weather, asteroids with quiet engines, debris clouds that act like mines, Eldar ghosts in the corners. Stragos keeps his jaw set and his orders crisp. He will not put the storm in a place where a broadcast refusal can make him look like a fool. Black arcs appear not out of warp, but behind a planet's night side, as if they were hiding there where the sun cannot gossip. The first salvo is clean. Lances rake void. Macro shells throw long arcs. Thor does not fly out as a target. He is not a child. He moves with the fleet. He slips between ships and grounds warp-bright bolts into sacrificial plates on cruisers built to take them. He drinks charge into his hammer until his teeth sing and his arm feels like iron bar. He picks his moment. He goes out. He cuts 4 engine bells off a sorcerer's frigate with strikes placed like a carpenter replacing floorboards. He lobotomizes a gun deck with a smash of Blackstone that drinks the crew's spell mid-nip and leaves them retching and human, and therefore slow. He throws the storm like a net over a raiding corvette and hauls. The thing shudders like an eel and dies. Malachai sends the assassin. The name is written on a bulkhead inside the lead transport. It is a child's name. It is Thor's name. The wall whispers it. The wall means it. Every time his name crosses the Vox, the wall purrs. Mjölnir hesitates. Not in his hand. In the air around him. The storm knows itself. The name in the wall convinces the storm that Thor is already here and does not need the hunger of movement. He loses a heartbeat. A ship loses a shield. A dozen die. He counts each because he must. He sees the trick. He switches channels. He asks the sisters to swallow the Vox in the transport with silence. They do. The name fades. He throws, this time with his human arm and not with feeling. The hammer flies because it trusts his arm more than the air. Malachai takes the note. Optimized, he mutters to an adjutant that is a pile of rules in a stolen human shape. He learns. Better traps. The fleet battle ends messy and victorious. 2 transports die. 3,000 live. Stragos writes a commendation in a hand that looks as if it would rather be a fist. He will sign it. He will never show it to anyone. He will use the authority it gives him to move a regiment out of a meat grinder and into a place where their deaths cost more dearly. Thor sits in a hangar with the hammer across his knees and breathes like a man who took a pack off after miles uphill. Aquilion stands 3 paces away and looks at a hull plate, not because it is interesting, but because standing too near would be intimacy, and intimacy rusts discipline. He clears his throat the way gold clears its throat when it remembers it used to be ore. You will be asked to disobey again, Aquilion says. Do it better. I will, Thor says. When you disobey me, Aquilion says, and the gold head tilts enough to be humor if one believes in such rumors about custodians. Argue faster. I will try, Thor says, smiling because men should practice smiling when they have bled, and the bleeding is, for the moment, done. Propaganda takes him like a foundry, takes ore and pours him into molds. Posters show the Aquila with a hammer in the negative space of its spine. Sermons mention the storm that knelt and use his boundary clauses as parables. The ecclesiarchy argues with itself with biblical citations and ration codes. Some priests call him a heresy in a cape. Some call him a saint. The synod chooses to call him sanctioned. That is how power survives. It finds words that fit on banners and fill mouths without choking. On Vigilum-Kyr, the workers in blue paint a smaller version of the symbol under ledges, where rain does not reach. A Hab school builds its timetable around the hour he rings the dome. Children feel the vibration and grin because the day feels held. In the Inquisition's quiet places, men write what they do not say aloud. Ordo Hereticus agents watch Ordo Malleus sanction a god with unease that tastes like envy. Ordo Xenos files a note. Correlation between Eldar webway flashes and storm deployments. An Inquisitor named Harrow watches Kest's reports with an expression like hunger and writes a memo titled, "Instrumentalization of Anomalous Asset in Apostasies of Scale." He will try to steal Thor one day to make him more useful. Kest sharpens her pen and her knives in anticipation. She sends Thor where he must go and keeps him where he must be kept. She writes to Terra and does not decorate her words. She gets an answer she cannot argue with without arguing with a man she cannot argue with, because he is a chair that is not a chair with a sun nailed to it. She breathes and does her work. Thunraz does not attack. He visits. He walks in dreams like a draft in a house that folds itself closed when you look for where the wind is coming from. He stands at the foot of Thor's bed in a Hab on a transport, and the bed is too small for a man like Thor. And Thor sleeps uncomfortably because comfort breeds disrespect in soldiers when it lies next to their duties. Thunraz looks at his sleeping face and shakes his head. "Do not crawl," he says, and the ribs of the room creak. "Rule. You are making yourself ornamental. They will keep your teeth dull. They will paint you in bright colors. You will throw lightning politely." Thor does not wake. He turns his head. He breathes. In the dream, he stands on a cliff on Asgard and watches a storm come in over a sea that does not taste like any sea in this galaxy. He smiles and does not smile. He says to the man beside him who is his brother and not his brother, "No." Thunraz laughs. He leaves the room. He writes the word "no" on the wall with a finger in dust the men keep losing a war against. In the morning, the crew chief sees it, curses half-heartedly, and assigns a boy to clean it. The boy does. He adds a hammer next to it. Crude and cheerful. None of them die for this. Sometimes, men get to be men. In a hive on a world lit by a thin star, an administratum clerk adds a column to a form. Stormclaws attempt YN. It saves an hour 5,000 times in a month across the sector. That hour buys a shipment of medicine reaching a moon before a fever burns through a barracks. The men who live do so because of a clerical change. Thor will never know. He will hit something with a hammer and feel useful. He will still do good, either way. On a forge, a young acolyte rewires a lightning vein and writes in her notes, "Resonance trick. Hit the thing holding the hole, not the hole." She will use it 30 years from now to break a heretic ship out of a blockade without firing a shell. She will be grandmother old and still call herself apprentice when she remembers this day. In Camera, a Drukhari Archon scowls at a captured sister who refuses to scream. He invents a game that makes other prisoners scream in harmonies. He listens to stories of a man who made a portal forget to be a door, and tells himself he will flay the air out of that man's lungs and pour it into bottles to drink later when he is thirsty and bored. He writes Thor's name on a slave's back and cuts it off in one piece and hangs it as a banner. It looks ridiculous. No one tells him. In a Necron tomb, a cryptech runs a simulation on magnetosphere resonance against Gauss flux and size because he hates when things hit things, and it works. He writes a counter and a defense. He files it in a mind that remembers every knife it ever built. In the eye, Malachai composes a sermon that is also a spell that is also a plan to kill a city by convincing it to whisper an adjective wrong. He wants Thor to come. He wants to lose again and better, because losing to a blade like that sharpens him more than winning against meat. He considers that his pride has become a path, and wonders whether he is any different from the men he tells to obey him, because his sky is bluer. In a back chapel on Terra, Varen lights a candle, and then a second, because he feels like it. He does not explain himself to the empty room. He thinks of a man with a hammer who knelt to the throne and did not prostrate. He thinks of the noise of that kneel in his bones. He smiles. He goes to work. On Vigilum-Kyr, children draw in the dust with sticks and their heels. One draws a bird with 2 heads, because that is the only bird. Another draws a hammer, because that is the only tool that matters today. They overlap without arguing. The shape comes out wrong and honest, and theirs. Thor stands at the edge of the city, on a parapet where wind walks. The aquila on his chest is under his heart, the rune of the hammer beside it. He wears no crown. The air plays with his hair because the air is a child and does not care about ceremonies. Storm clouds roll. Lightning etches wings in the murk. For a breath, across the dome, the bolts shape a sign. A double-headed bird with a line through its spine that is a hammer only if you know to look for a hammer. No one commands the sky to make it. It makes itself, because some symbols become hard for weather to forget once they are cut on men's habits. Somewhere in the city, a boy looks up and laughs. Somewhere else, a woman sees the sign and stops crying. There is still sorrow, an ash that does not commend itself to rain. But the sign does not tell them to love their grief. It tells them to count it and keep walking. The Vox chimes. Kest's voice is the voice of duty, with the skin peeled off. "Storm Warden," she says, and there is less iron and more tired woman in it than there was yesterday. 3 targets, 1 mine world, 1 shrine, 1 convoy. Choose 2. The 3rd will bleed. He closes his eyes. He listens. In the sound the city makes. The bell he struck earlier. The forge belch. The field whispering bugs off the dawn. He hears the cost. He hears his own breath. He hears a laugh he loved on another sky. "Mine world and convoy," he says. "The shrine has walls enough for 1 day." "Understood," Kest says. "You will justify it to the ecclesiarchy later." "I will," he says. "Bring your reasons and your blood," she says out of habit. "I always do," he says. He steps off the parapet and falls like a promise. On a ship in the dark, a creature that used to be a man, and now is a mirror, with legs watches a screen, and drags a finger down its surface. "Not yet," Thunraz murmurs. "But soon, soon, he will choose me without noticing the choosing. In a palace where stone pretends to be patient, and men pretend to be machines, a nailed sun cannot smile. Still, for a fractional instant, the accounts of a man who made himself glory and law add up on a page. And between the numbers, there is the warmth of a hearth, seen through a doorway as you pass it in a hurry on your way into the rain. The galaxy recalculates around a storm that learned to count, a law that learned to breathe, and a symbol half-painted in lipstick under a saint's ledge. Rain moves inward over Vigilum-Kyr. Somewhere deep, thunder speaks as if to a friend it will keep seeing. "Protect," he says again and again, and the city listens, and the storm answers, and the war does not end. But choices become a little less lonely where he walks.